Hey everybody, I'm Miss Hannah from the Highland Park Public Library, and welcome to Library in Your Living Room. Today I'm coming to you from my kitchen, because I'm going to show you guys how to make a recipe. So Earth Day this year is on Wednesday, April 22nd, and a really fun way to celebrate any kind of holiday is to make some cookies. Today I'm going to show you how to make Earth Day cookies. So they're just a regular sugar cookie recipe, but we're going to make them in the shape of the globe. Before you start any kind of cooking or baking project in your kitchen, be sure to get your grown-ups' permission. Or better yet, ask them to help you bake. All right, so here is the recipe. I wrote it down so you guys can see all of the numbers and stuff. So feel free to pause the video and write this down if you want to, but I'll read the ingredients out loud. So we have a half a stick of unsalted butter, a half cup of sugar, so regular white sugar, 1 egg, a half teaspoon of vanilla extract, 1 cup of flour, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, and a pinch of salt. And then for baking, you bake it at 325 degrees for 15 to 18 minutes. Now, I know that it's been really hard to get to the store. It's been hard for me to get to the store. So we're going to talk a little bit about substitutions. So if you don't have certain ingredients at home, there are some workarounds that you can use. And I'm going to use some workarounds today too. So first off, I don't have unsalted butter in my house, but I do have regular salted butter. So what I'm going to do is just use my regular salted butter in the recipe and then skip that pinch of salt that's at the very end of the recipe. Another thing that I don't have is regular white sugar, but I do have brown sugar, so we're going to use brown sugar instead of white. But if you have white sugar at home, feel free to use that because that's what the recipe says. And the last substitution we'll talk about is baking powder. So I actually do have baking powder in my house, but not everybody does. And you can make your own substitute for baking powder in your home. So what baking powder does in a cookie is it makes the cookies get a little bit puffy and it makes them sort of rise and get bigger. So you do want that in a recipe, otherwise the cookies are kind of flat and dense and chewy. What you can use instead of baking powder is a mixture of baking soda and lemon juice. So for this recipe, it calls for a 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder. So what you would do is add just a couple drops of lemon juice and a pinch of baking soda until it equals about a 1/4 teaspoon of those two together. And you'll want a little bit more lemon juice than baking soda. And those two ingredients mixed together will help make the cookies rise and puff up, just like baking powder would. All right, whew. That was a lot of talking. Are we ready to start baking? Excellent. All right, so here I have my butter. I'm using salted butter, but unsalted butter is preferred. And you'll want the butter to be as warm as you can get it without it melting. If you can let it sit out for a couple of hours before you start baking, that is great. I don't have that kind of time, so I put my butter in the microwave for about 20 seconds on half power, just enough time to get it nice and soft. So what I'm going to do is squish the butter with the back of a spoon to make sure that it's soft enough to start mixing. And it's really soft, so that's great. My next ingredient is my brown sugar. If you have white sugar at home, that works fine. But today we'll do brown. And the recipe calls for a half a cup. Here's my lovely magenta half cup measure. Okay. So I'm going to dump that in my bowl. And I just remembered something really important that I forgot to do, and that's preheat my oven. So the recipe said the oven needs to be 325 degrees Fahrenheit to bake the cookies, and it takes some time for the oven to get up to that temperature. So before you start mixing anything, you'll want to set your oven to 325 degrees and then wait for that oven to get warm enough. Most ovens will make a beeping sound, or they'll even show you on the screen that it says 325 degrees. So make sure the oven is actually 325 degrees before you start putting stuff in there. But I'll heat up my oven later, it's fine. So now we're gonna mix our butter and sugar together. And this is called creaming, when you mix butter and sugar together. It's kind of stuck all to my spoon, so I'm gonna scrape my spoon off a little bit. And you'll do this for a couple of minutes until the butter and sugar are nice and well mixed together. You want them to look like it's all one thing. Recipes say to cream butter and sugar until it looks fluffy. And I'm actually not 100% sure what that means, but if the butter and sugar looks fluffy to you, that means that it's ready. I mostly just look for like streaks of butter or chunks of sugar, and if I don't see any chunks of butter or streaks of sugar, then I know that it is well creamed and that we're ready to add the next ingredient. And I think we're just about there. All right, so next I'm going to crack an egg. Get that egg in the party. And I'm going to put the shell on a plate. And I'll throw out the shell later. Usually don't use shells in baking. And my table is kind of loud, so I'm just going to lift my bowl up so that the table isn't making a weird noise while I'm stirring. And right now your mixture is probably looking a little bit wet and gloopy. And that's okay, because once we add the flour and the baking powder and the salt, if you're using it, it'll be less gloopy. And I'm going to scrape off my spoon again because there's some lumps of butter stuck on it. There we go. And I'll mix those lumps in. All right, cool. All right, so now we've got our butter, our sugar, our egg. Now it's time to add some flavor. So the recipe calls for a half teaspoon of vanilla extract. So that's what we'll use first. And these will give the cookies a really nice, delicate vanilla flavor. And this is just a personal preference. I really like almond extract, an almond flavor. So I'm going to put about a 1/4 teaspoon of almond in. But this is totally optional. You don't have to do this if you don't want to. This is actually empty, so we'll skip almond extract. What you could also do, if you like snickerdoodles, you can add a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, and then the cookies will have a really nice snickerdoodle flavor. Okay, so that's all mixed. Now we're gonna add our dry ingredients. So those are the powdery things. So we'll start off with the baking powder. Or if you're doing the substitute baking soda lemon juice, now is the time to add it. And then we'll also add 1 cup of all-purpose flour. Kind of wishing I'd used a bigger bowl. So now my bowl is getting pretty full. When you're baking, you want to use as large a bowl as possible because you don't want stuff spilling out of the sides. So right now I'm stirring very, very carefully so that I don't spill flour all over my outfit. And the more you stir baked goods, the chewier they get. So you don't want to stir it too much. You just want to stir it enough so that you don't see any streaks of flour or random ingredients. You want it to all look like one big, happy, doughy family. All right, so that's pretty well mixed. All right, so that's a basic sugar cookie recipe. If you want to make just regular sugar cookies, you would put these on a cookie sheet and put them in the oven and you're all done. But we're going to make some Earth Day cookies, which means we're going to use some food coloring. So I've got my blue food coloring and my green food coloring. And you can probably guess which is which. The blue will be for my oceans, and the green will be for the land. So we're gonna take our dough and we're gonna separate it into two bowls. So I think I'll do about 2 scoops of each. So that'll be Team Blue. And this will be Team Green. And then I'm going to use the spoon to scrape the sides of the bowl to make sure that I get all of the cookie dough out. I'm going to use my finger to push the dough off the spoon. And it's okay to use your hands with baking and get a little messy, as long as you make sure your hands are nice and washed before you start. Because you don't want germs in your cookies. That's gross. All right, so we'll start with the Team Blue first. So I'm going to add, we'll start off with 3 drops of blue food coloring and see if that's enough. Start with a spoon. And the thing about food coloring is that you can always add more color, but you can't take the color away. So you want to start off slow with just a couple of drops, and then if you think it needs more, then you add more. All right, what do you think? Does it look blue enough? I think it needs a couple more drops, so we'll do another 3 drops. Stir it up. And again, if you don't have food coloring at home, that is totally fine. These sugar cookies taste delicious no matter what color they are. So you can absolutely celebrate Earth Day without a bunch of food coloring. And some people, like my mom, say that things taste better when they're not a weird color like blue. So, it's a matter of personal opinion. All right, so that was about 10 drops of blue food coloring. And I think that's blue enough. It looks like an ocean. All right, so now we'll move on to Team Green. Let's do it. All right, so since the blue took about 10 drops of food coloring, I'm going to start off with 8 drops of green. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And depending on the brand of food coloring you buy, you'll probably want to squeeze the bottle very gently because those drops come out kind of fast. So we're going to stir it. And you'll want to stir it just enough so you don't see any streaks of brown cookie dough, because you want it all to be the same green color. Okay, so that's my green, and that's my blue. Alright, so our next step is really fun. We're going to get our hands messy and start making our globes. So we're going to take our 1/4 teaspoon from earlier, we had it in the baking powder. So we're going to do about 1/4 teaspoon of green and 1/4 teaspoon of blue. And this is a really wet dough, so you'll probably get very sticky. And then we'll do another teaspoon of green, or another 1/4 teaspoon of green, another 1/4 teaspoon of blue. And what you're kind of doing is sort of mashing the green and the blue together. Get it really close so you can see. So it's going to look like, eventually it's going to look like the Earth with planets and stars, well, not stars, but you know, it's going to look like the Earth with different continents and oceans and stuff. And if this dough is too wet for you to work with, if it's just too sticky, you can add about a tablespoon of flour at a time. Make it a little bit drier. But I kind of like getting sticky, so, well, keep on keeping on. So keep adding the blue and the green dough until you get about a tablespoon sized lump of cookie. And I thought I had a tablespoon around to show you how big a tablespoon was, but I don't. So a tablespoon is about the size of, let's see, a tablespoon is about 6 of these half teaspoons, or about 12 1/4 teaspoons. So once you have 6 green lumps and 6 blue lumps together, that's about 1 tablespoon. And I'm gonna sort of wipe this dough off my hands. All right, so put each of your planets on a cookie sheet. You'll want to make sure that the cookie sheet is greased. You can use a cooking spray like this, or you can use butter or parchment paper. Just make sure that the whole cookie sheet is covered so that nothing sticks. All right, and then once all of your little earths are formed and they're all on your nice greased cookie sheet, you're going to put them in the 325-degree oven for 15 to 18 minutes, or until the top and the edges just start to get crispy. You don't want the whole thing to turn brown and crispy because that's a scorched earth. But, you know, a little bit on the edges and on the top, that's how you know the cookies are done. All right, and there you have it. That is how you make sugar cookies for Earth Day or for any occasion. Thank you so much for watching this program. Be sure to check out our website, hplibrary.org, for even more library in your living room programs. Until next time, stay safe and wash your hands.